That's right. It's time for more Yesshift. Here's the beginning of the year. I'm Dan Schinder.
And I'm Steven Schinder.
We are Yesshift, and
We talk about Yes and people associated with Yes. And it's actually been 5 weeks now since you and I did this together. I did a few birthday episodes in the past week or so. Yeah, and but like right at the beginning of our little holiday break, or I think a few days after the last one we did together, we got this news about Jim Ladd passing away, and I messaged you and said, I think we should do something like talk about Jim Ladd. And then it sounded like you had a lot of memories to share about him. And I have a bit as well, but I think you have you basically grew up on Jim Ladd, right?
yeah, and there's a lengthy description in the post about Jim's career. He was a lot more than just a DJ. He was also a producer, but he was also a lot more than that with the different shows he did and his stead at KLOS and starting at KNAC before that, and then KMET, then KMET guy. Anyway, long career, and then Sirius XM. He had a show called Innerview, and I used to listen to him even before he had that show because he was a DJ. And I remember distinctly two specific shows from Innerview that happened to be related to Yes. The first one was from either 75 or 76. So I was 12 or 13. And he was interviewing them. I guess it was probably during the Relayer tour because I know that they were at a restaurant. They were in LA. So it was probably when they were coming through town on tour. And I remember that. Oh, and I have it on tape. I have it on quarter-inch reel to reel, which is how I used to record stuff that I liked on the radio, like interviews and stuff. And the other one is from 1980, after Drama came out, and he interviewed Chris Squire and his wife at the time together, and I have that on tape as well. And so, yeah, I did pretty much grow up listening to Jim. And then, of course, he went on to do many other things in the rock world. And he was what's known as one of the very last freeform rock DJs in the United States, that format. And then he went on to also do stuff with Roger Waters. He was a fictitious DJ on that album that Roger did, and he did some work with Billy Sherwood and Keith Emerson, and we'll talk about those pieces. But when did you first come across Jim?
Yeah, so for me, it was in the late 2000s. I think at the end of 2007 was when this Notes from the Edge interview with Mike Tiano interviewing Billy Sherwood and Jim Ladd together. And again, this was during the Yes hiatus, like towards the end of the hiatus, so we were kind of starved for like content from these guys. And so I read this interview and I'm like, wait, Jim Ladd, who is that? And I sent you like the album covers for these, but the first of these was Alone Out Here. Jim Ladd's Headsets, Chapter 1, Alone Out Here, I should say. And it's very space themed. I guess it has redos of a few familiar tracks like Universal Garden, the conspiracy song Lonesome Trail, World Trades, One World Going Round. But there's also some new stuff on there, and it sounded like there was some improvisational nature to this thing, and it's space themed, and like has been said, Jim was like a narrator on there, and he worked with Billy on the music. And I've heard a little bit of it. I know the title the title track, and I think Melancholic Deity both had Jay Shellen playing drums on those as well. So there's another Yes connection. So I think that came out in 2008, and then the follow up, Chapter 2 Sides, came out, I think, a year later. And I remember seeing a post somewhere about, oh, Billy Sherwood is going to be on the radio with Jim Ladd or something like that. And I heard two tracks from that album that I still remember
Really?
bits of very clearly. One of them was called War and Peace,
Yeah.
and the other is called Worlds Collide. I remember a few of the lyrics as you could hear Billy singing, "Changing of the tide as worlds collide," and I could just imagine that being part of some sort of post-apocalyptic movie. I remember where I was when I listened to that particular broadcast. I was at my grandma's house on my mom's side and listening to it on her white stereo radio thing. I still remember
Interesting.
that. And I think one time Jim even hosted Yoso on one of my birthdays, like back in
Oh,
2010 or something. The Yes slash Toto hybrid type thing that Billy and a couple others were part of. I think Tony K was part of that as well. So I pretty much learned about Jim Ladd through those, and sometime during college, I think like 2017, I was kind of checking out Sirius XM radio and deep tracks. I gravitated toward that, and I guess Jim Ladd was part of that, so I guess I heard him on that as well. But um yeah, he was like really a very prominent to talk to so many people. I saw on YouTube there's some audio of when he's had like you mentioned, there was the drama period, he interviewed Chris Squire then, and also him and his first wife Nikki in 76. Nikki showed up briefly during that interview, which is cool.
she was
And
with him the whole time on the one in 1980.
mm,
Was
well,
with
I
both
heard
of them.
one from 1980 where I only heard Chris's voice, so maybe there were a couple different
Oh,
ones. But yeah, I haven't checked out all the things uh on YouTube. Like if you search go to the Yes Source YouTube channel, so that YouTube user, there's some Jim Ladd interview stuff. There's even one from 2004 where he had the band in the studio and they were doing the acoustic
I was
set. I think it was the day after they did Yes Acoustic, that video thing.
yeah, I was going to
Um,
mention that, and I think that that was the spark of how they ended up doing that set on Songs from Songa's tour, the 35th anniversary tour. I think it came from those experiences that they wanted to bring it to the big stage.
yeah, that was very much a prep for that, I think.
Hmm.
And I also saw that John Anderson did an acoustic version of "Oh Nerval Only Heart" on Jim Ladd's Living Room, that show back
Yeah.
in 2011. So he's talked to a bunch of these guys, but of course he's talked to many musicians. And I was reading up on him, reading how he was like considered a freeform radio DJ. So, from what I understand, he kind of went outside of the, standard checklist that some DJs would do when it comes to playing rock music on the radio, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, not just the selections that he was given latitude to have choices over, but also just the way he did his show, you know,
Mm,
the way he presented himself, the things he wove into the conversation on the airwaves and whatnot.
yeah. Yeah,
And I
I think something
remember,
like that definitely feels like more my speed, because if it's just something that's, standard,
packaged.
it kind of feels like just kind of generic and whatnot. So
Yeah.
I kind of like that. And for some reason, like in my head, there's something about the radio format, like the image of someone in a radio station and broadcasting to people, that feels really different from, just broadcasting from your home on the internet. Like I feel like the radio station, maybe because I have a specific visual aesthetic that I imagine when I think of one, darker lighting. It kind of feels like a secret base in a way, which feels kind of fun.
Yeah. There was a documentary he did the voice for, and for all I know, maybe many. But I remember watching a documentary, and honestly, I don't know if this was 10 or 25 years ago. I just can't pull it, the context. And it was a documentary on something that had to do with history, possibly the Old West, something like that. And I remember listening, going, man, that voice is so familiar. Who is that? Who is that? And I hadn't listened to radio in a long time at this point. And then I saw in the credits it was Jim Ladd. I was like, duh, oh my gosh. I just can't think of what that was, but it had nothing to do with music,
Yeah,
which I
he
thought was cool.
definitely, yeah, he has a great, you know, not just a radio voice, but a narrator voice. So I imagine he got a lot of work out of that.
Yeah. And I'm remembering as well that I wanted to mention this. I actually met him once, maybe twice. And this is back in 81, 2, or 3, right around there. So I was like 18 to 20, somewhere in there, 21 maybe. And there used to be, so my friend Jay Sheehan, who I
Yeah.
grew up with from high school on, um, went on to be a major stage manager, lighting designer, all those different things. Jay, when we were around that age, managed a, a bowling alley called Canoga Bowl. I think it was Canoga Bowl in the West San Fernando Valley. And they had a couple of these events that were called Rockin' Bowl. And it was only DJs from KMET or KLOS, whichever it was at the time that most of them were on. David Perry, Jim Ladd, J.J. Jackson, all these great DJs from LA, and a bunch of rock stars. I remember Weird Al Yankovic was there. Oh, Martha Quinn from MTV was interviewing him. So there were MTV people there as well. So maybe JJ was already MTV by then. And Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers were there bowling. And I remember meeting Jim with Jay and actually talking to him for a while. And he was very just humble, seemed very humble and down to earth. And the term, what you see is what you get, what you heard is what you got. That was like the real Jim Ladd that you heard. It wasn't an act or anything like that. That was really neat because I was an avid listener back then and had been listening since I was like 11 or 10 from back in the day.
Yeah, and he also did a little bit of narration on that Pink Floyd tribute
Yeah,
album from the 2000s, Back Against the Wall. You had Billy
which is
Sherwood and
great.
some other
Yeah,
prog rock guys, and I
I
think he
remember
was
when that
on
came out.
yeah, I think he was on Waiting for the Worms and Outside the Wall.
Yeah,
Um, talk about an all-star project right there.
yeah. Keith
Um,
Emerson was involved.
yeah.
And I remember um, that Jim's show Interview broadcasted for 12 years, I believe, on 160 stations, that's quite a run and a really good syndication as well.
Yeah, that's a very high number. Like I feel like any person in radio would be like super jazzed to have that many, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely.
Yeah. Um Sorry, I'm like sharing this around so my head is kind of
That's okay. I'll
scrambled.
give a birthday shout out while you're doing that.
Oh, well, I was about to ask, did you already mention the Keith Emerson connection or?
No, no, we didn't. And that was, let me look at my note real quick because and I'll show some pictures of Jim through the years in just a
Yeah.
sec. That was, I want to make sure I get the order right because I know there's three. There's Alone Out There, Waiting of the Worms, and Back Against the Wall. Is that Outside the Wall? Outside the Wall. I think it's Outside the Wall that had Keith, right?
Um, oh, okay. I'm looking it up. He was definitely on Waiting for the Worms.
Okay, Waiting
So,
for the Worms. And Jim interviewed Billy and Keith on that one
oh, okay.
about that. Yeah,
Yeah. Nice.
yeah. Heard some many, many, many great interviews with. I think I heard a Queen interview actually with Jim Ladd as
Oh,
well.
really? Which queen did he interview?
Um,
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it's the band queen.
yeah, you had
Yeah.
me there for a moment.
Yeah,
As I
but
thought, man, which version of the band?
right. Well, while we're on it, do you remember like what era that would have been for Queen?
Yeah, it was. I think when the game came out, which is the tour that I saw, so that would have been 1981. I think I was a senior in high school or just graduated. So 81, 82. I graduated in
Yeah.
81.
Yeah, okay. That one came out in 1980, so
Yeah,
yeah, around then. Yeah.
yeah. So now you know, folks, I'm not 40 like y'all think. What's so funny?
Right, but from the like older interviews that I was able to find and listen to a bit of in preparation for this, it really feels like Jim had a sense of humor and was
Yeah,
very easy to talk to, and but he also like knew his stuff, and it's
yeah. He
yeah,
was a
like
journalist.
yeah, he
For all
was.
intents and purposes, he was a journalist, not just a DJ spinning discs,
Right.
or
Yeah, I think
licorice
there are like
pizzas, as we used to call them.
right. Yeah, I think for some job titles, like because of how they sound, like they might sound simple on the surface to some people and they might have these preconceived notions,
And get
like
stereotyped.
yeah, like oh you just like spin some discs or whatever, but he was really like he seemed like a very intellectual person, and just the way he talk to musicians about what they're working on and how they work on it, and you'd also get some good laughs here and there.
Yeah. And
So
you know what
yeah.
I'm thinking of as you're mentioning that? I thought of the TV show WKRP, and I'd be fine if someone corrects me on this. But I believe, I can't remember what his name was, but I remember that the actor Howard Hessman, the DJ he played on WKRP, I believe might have been modeled in part about Jim Ladd because Howard Hessman's character was total freeform and more on the hippie side, which calls for let's just show a couple pictures of Jim. Start with this really old one back in the day. Gosh, he looks like a baby in this one. Uh, look how young he was. He's got a little fatty in his fingers there. I suppose. But he looks so young there. And then in later years, here's a bigger picture, the one that we have on the player there. There's Jim in more recent times. Looks very much the same, actually, in a lot of ways. And then this one, I think, was probably pretty more recent because he just looks a little older there. But I, I just can't remember Howard Hessman's. What was his character's name? Here, I'll look it up real quick. And I'd love to know if people know whether or not that's correct, or at least personally maybe made that association.
Mm, yeah, I mean with the personality he had, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some fictional character that
Johnny Fever.
they, Johnny Fever. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking up a bit more about that. um
Yeah. That's
Yeah, I can't find anything right away. So if
yeah. Same.
people like who are more in the know about that, like just let us know. Um, but yeah, like it really makes me wish that I had, I became aware of Jim in the late 2000s and then heard a bit more from him, like maybe a decade later. And yeah, I just wish that I had been able to listen to more of him while he was still around, and also with those albums he did with Billy, like in hindsight, like those were only sold from his website. So like if I had a time machine, I would like go back and order them, because it I don't know if they're like widely available now, but I bet those projects were like really fun to work on.
Yeah, and I know what you mean about being able to listen to those interviews and things when they came out. Everything's available now online, but there is something different about having been able to be there when it happened and hearing those interviews and the news that came from them and the information that came from them in real time at the time. It's
Yeah.
a different experience. And now is fine. Now is a different experience as well. Like I just finished listening to the audiobook of Phil Collins' Not Dead Yet. And it was really interesting to learn all the stuff that was going on concurrently with other stuff I knew about. But then you get the deeper backstory. And had all those things been public at the time, which they weren't, a lot of the things, it would have been a whole different picture. So I get that, just the context of hearing things in real time at the time.
Yeah, I did used to back when it was around listen to Rockline in the late 2000s, early 2010s, but when it was streaming from their website on the internet, and that was like I it's kind of indescribable, that feeling of being able to listen while it's happening. I mean, I know we're able to do this and broadcast to various social media, but there's just something about radio that feels kind of different, and I don't really know how to really put into words like how what the difference is really like. It's such a bizarre, surreal thing to think about.
I think it's in part because it's so old. It's such an old medium. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's one of the first ways beyond the telegraph and the telegram that and the newspaper, printed publications. It's the first way that more information, not just news but entertainment, got out to more people more quickly in real time.
Yeah.
It precedes the TV. Even grandpa, my dad, before they had a TV when he was little, they'd all gather around the radio. I think most of us have heard these stories and listened to a radio show, Orson Welles, and different things like that. And some of those became TV shows. So I think that's part of the allure.
Yeah,
And
but even when radio stations would eventually broadcast on the internet as well, it still felt kind of different from
yeah,
podcasting and all this other stuff somehow.
yeah, that's true.
Right. So do you have anything else you want to say about Jim Ladd before we do this other little shout out?
Only that there are a handful of other DJs from back in the day growing up on the same station that I can remember, but there'll never be another Jim Ladd. And it wasn't just his great voice, it wasn't just his freeform format, it was also the the things you said, his
Yeah.
preparedness, you know, behaving like a journalist and not someone that just played music on the radio from shelves of stuff they supplied for him. I think that's some of the huge stuff that made him different, that he innovated other shows to have rather than just his time slot during the night to play music, you know.
Yeah, and when he passed about a month ago, I just remembered to have this post open. Billy said Jim was a kind and gentle soul. It was my honor to get to know him as I did, make 2 headsets records with him, and play live with him in LA. He will be missed by so many. A very sad day indeed. R.I.P., my friend. My deepest condolences to Helene Ladd, his loving wife. So, yeah, that was like getting that news. It was like such a like what a day to get that
Yeah,
news, just these people who are like part of the music world, and then it's just it's never easy. Like I know it's very, there might be this idea that, well, people are getting older, so of course they'll pass away, but that doesn't make it any
right,
easier to take in.
right.
But
It's sort
we
of,
do our best to remember them for who they were.
yeah, it's the part that leaves the mark. The
Yeah.
mark is always there if they've made an impression on you, but when they're gone, that's when it's like, wow, you know.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, if there are any other Jim Ladd fans, feel free to comment. Like, even if we're not live and you're watching the archive, you can comment after the fact. Um, so yeah, and also we also saw that today is another person's birthday as well, one whom we've talked to quite a bit. So that would be Jeff Berlin.
Who?
Um, yeah, I reshared the
I'm
interview
sorry,
we.
who? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, Jeff Berlin.
Jeff, happy birthday. Maybe later on Drum Talk TV, if I can get it together, there's so much to do today. I'll post a clip from our 10-year anniversary show that Jeff was the co-host from. He's in one of the promos for the documentary that's coming out. But otherwise, that's coming like before the end of this month, folks. So you'll get a lot of Jeff Berlin. It was a lot of fun. He was a great co-host, and you'll get to see him play 3 times. He plays with our MC, A.D. Adams, great drummer. He plays with myself and Carl Inman, who you'll learn about in the documentary. And then he does the all jam finale at the very end with my band Assault, with guest vocalist Chaz West and A.D. Adams on drums, and Jeff also joining on bass, doing a legendary R&B song, all of us together. It's a lot of fun and an honor having Jeff.
Yeah,
I
and
remember when I was on Zoom with him, pitching, asking him, will you be the co-host of the show? This is what it means. And he was like, yeah, wow, that sounds amazing. He says, but why do you want me? And I said, because the other 32 people are busy that we asked, which isn't correct.
right. Yeah, it was fun having him as the co-host at that 10-year Drum Talk TV event, like the way you guys bounced off each other. So
Yeah, it was great.
And of course, love his playing on Jack's songs, that album he put out.
Yeah.
And of course, ABWH and Evening of Yes Music Plus and
Bill
Patrick Moraz's Story of I. Yeah,
Bruford. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the tie-in for Yes, folks, besides that, just so you know, is that when Bill was putting his band together, it was Patrick Moraz who had worked with Jeff Berlin first and recommended the, I think still teenager, maybe 19-year-old Jeff Berlin or 18 to Bill, and he was with him for years. And that's why it was an easy sub for Tony Levin when he had to bow out of the ABWH tour for a while with hepatitis, that Bill said, well, let's call Jeff Berlin. And he learned everything on a moment's notice. When we say everything, that includes Heart of the Sunrise. It includes Close to the Edge. It includes And You and I. It includes all the stuff from the ABWH album. I mean, quick study and a very technical player. And of course, well-versed studied musician, but also able to just freeform it like anybody. Just a wonderful musician and a great guy.
Yeah. So again, happy birthday to Jeff Berlin and happy heavenly birthday to Jim Ladd.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that'll be it for this episode. Later today at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern US time, we have Joe Luca, keyboardist of Awaken, who are going to do some 9012 live shows, set lists recreating that tour. So we're going to be talking with him about that. And in the meantime, you can follow us at facebook.com/Yesshift, youtube.com/@Yesshift, anchor.fm/Yesshift, or just search Yesshift in any podcast app. You'll probably find us. And you can email yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com with any feedback, comments, suggestions.
Ooh, I have an idea. I'm going to send something in.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually came up with an idea or two while coming up with this show. So yeah, we might have to talk about that after, but cool. Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks everybody so much for following what we do. And you can learn more about Jim Ladd on Wikipedia. That's where I got a lot of that info and some from my own personal memories. And
and look up all the interviews that are on YouTube. There's a bunch, and it's just there's something calming about listening to those older interviews for some reason. Maybe it's nostalgia, or even nostalgia for a time that was before my time, because I'm a 94 baby, but hearing some of these 70s and 80s interviews, there's just something therapeutic about it.
I love that stuff too. I love going back and especially learning something new that I never knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, Phil Collins' book was just amazing. I'll be doing a tribute to Phil and Nick Mason. We're going to combine their birthdays. We're going to do that on Drum Talk TV and Yesshift on the 28th. And I'll probably give a little review of the book as well. And we're going to look to get Phil on finally, which would be awesome. Huge, immense influence on my personal, not just drumming, but musicality. I'd say absolutely in my top four. Absolutely. He may even be number 2 to John Bonham.
Yeah, it's very high praise there.
Yeah, and I've been playing 54 years and I still love playing Genesis music. In fact, I'm going to play Genesis music today for a private, when I say private, I mean for our team live stream test, because on on Drum Talk TV Brilliance.com, we have some live stream concerts coming up, and we're going to test some stuff out with me playing in the studio on our virtual amphitheater setting and whatnot. You can learn about that if you just go to the Drum Talk TV page. So I have some Genesis picked out to warm up for his birthday show.
Yeah. All
Cool.
right.
Thanks
Thanks
everybody.
everyone.